There are two ways of subverting the mindset of being transactional about sexuality. Two ways, right? The sexual and the non-sexual. There's two ways of subverting that, right? One way of subverting that as a man when it comes to sexuality is to make yourself sexually appealing and to be direct and to deal with women who desire you sexually. By them desiring you sexually, it takes away their ability to leverage sex against you to gain things that they want out of you non-sexually. Now, when you understand this, what it means is this: there's always going to be pluses and minuses to everything, right? So in some of those instances, there are going to be some women that you probably could have dealt with, or you could have been in a relationship with, or you could have eventually had sex with, who are either not going to deal with you at all, right? Or there are going to be women who only want to have sex with you, even if ultimately your desire is something long-term, right? But you just have to accept that not every woman you have sex with is going to be a woman who truly likes you and wants to be in a relationship with you. You have to accept that, embrace it, and understand it, right? But that's the first way of subverting the transactional mindset around sexuality. The second way of subverting the transactional mindset around sexuality as a man is to do something called an exercise in self-control. So the first one is called the biology first approach, right? Now, this is something that Alan Roger Kerr would call mode 1, but I call it the biology first approach because it's a little bit different than mode 1, right? Because mode 1 is going to be either being upfront that you don't want it to be anything other than sex, right? That it's never going to be anything other than sex, right? Which would put a woman in a position of going against what it is that you say that you want if she wants more. And then the other form of mode 1, when it comes to being honest about your non-sexual intentions, is to tell a woman that you're looking for something serious up front, which may influence her desire to engage with you sexually because of the idea of something non-sexual that's going to come out of it, right? And with this idea, it puts a woman in a stance of either of exacerbating a gentleman gigolo complex, right? Now, what does that mean when I say exacerbating a gentleman gigolo complex? It's pretty much, it can come off, not always, but it can come off as pandering to that gentleman gigolo complex, that sexual duplicity. So that means that if a woman's in a position where she doesn't want anything more, then she may have to convince herself that she doesn't want anything more in order to deal with you, or only deal with you because she doesn't respect you as a long-term prospect, or see you as a challenge to overcome. If you tell her it's only ever going to be sex, right? But if you tell her that you want something that's more profound, then you put a woman in a position to where she may be engaging with you sexually up front with the idea of a guarantee of something long-term coming out of it, or she may want to hold off on sex in order to see if you're the man who she would want to be in a long-term relationship or eventual marriage with, which would put you in a position of pretty much having to wait and not truly exercising your dominance. And if you were to sleep with this woman, right, and then later realize, either due to a lack of sexual compatibility or a lack of non-sexual compatibility, that you do not want to take things as far as you offered up front, that she will see you as a liar and a manipulator, the same way that a woman would see a man who led with a relationship who ultimately was lying about his intentions. That's why I make a delineation between the biology first approach and mode 1. It can look the same. It can look exactly the same at times, right? It can look exactly the same, but there are some key differences. Now, the other way of subverting that expectation is to deal with the woman non-sexually, and I'm talking about from a masculine dominant stance as a man, while doing an exercise in self-control. Only investing the time and the energy to ascertain if this is a woman who you would like to engage with, right? Like, only that. Or engaging with this woman non-sexually in a way that causes her to desire to engage with you sexually. But it's an exercise in self-control. Because if you begin non-sexually, and then this woman doesn't naturally grow in her desire to engage with you sexually, right? Then if you then want to engage with her sexually, then now it's a situation where you've subverted the dynamic and you're no longer in a dominant position. It appears as if you've bait and switched, right? Or it appears as if you lied about taking a dominant stance. So if you're utilizing an exercise in self-control, a lot of it is about engaging with a woman in a way where you are not pressing the issue of sex. You're assessing whether or not she has the capacity to be someone who adds value to you non-sexually. And you're utilizing what I call the 9-7 dichotomy, which means that this woman needs to have at least a 9 level of sexual attraction to you when you begin non-sexually, so that if you were to put out innuendo, she's going to follow that innuendo forward, and she's going to take the path of that innuendo leading towards a place where the small amount of sexual innuendo that you put into the way that you speak causes her to desire it, and then she's going to want to escalate things sexually based off of your non-sexual interactions. But when you're doing things this way, you're going to be assessing the woman to see if she's someone you'd want to have sex with, and not necessarily the other way around, right? And those are the two different ways of subverting the expectation when it comes to sexuality, subverting the transactional mindset that's built into many women's social programming when it comes to sexuality, right? It's either the biology first approach or the exercise in self-control, right? Something to understand, like to take a masculine dominant stance, something to understand is that when you're taking a masculine dominant stance, either it needs to be about sex and the woman accepts that, she embraces it, and she understands it, right? Or it's a situation where you are trying to assess if this woman is someone you're willing to have sex with. But if you're in a position where your ultimate desire is to be integrated, right? If you are not the person who both wants sex and non-sexual connection less than the woman does, then it will create and establish this transactional model, right? And this is what I mean by that, right? Let's say it's a scenario in which you lead with sex, right? But then you start wanting a relationship. I believe Al Roger Curry told some stories like this about Sharon, and I think there was another woman who was I think this African woman, I forgot her name in the story that he told, but he would be very upfront about his sexual intentions, not saying that he doesn't want anything more non-sexually, and then through a woman doing the bare minimum, or of a woman just being herself and he seeing her lifestyle and how she carries herself non-sexually, instead of setting standards and allowing the woman to show that she wants more, he would say, you know what, I like you now, so I want to be in a relationship with you. The thing to understand about interacting with the woman sexually and then you being the one who wants to push things forward into the non-sexual is that it subverts the expectation and the woman loses respect for you. Not every scenario that works in that particular way is going to be one in which it's time to be upfront. Once you've established a particular model of approaching a woman, if you are the one who wants to move things into the next level and not something that she desires and shows that she wants on her own, a woman will lose respect for you, right? So let's say that you're beginning with the sexual, right? Then you set your standards based off of how she interacts with you non-sexually as well as sexually about what it's going to take for that relationship to become more, right? But if she doesn't want more, or she doesn't show that she wants more, you let the situation stay where it is. And if you're looking to have something that's more emotionally profound, if she's not putting that energy out there, if you have a limited amount of women that you want to have in your rotation, you may cut her off. And if you want to keep her around as a fuck buddy or friends with benefits, then you keep her in that position, right? If you start non-sexually, the exercise in self-control, where you are pretty much friend zoning the woman, if she doesn't show sexual desire towards you, and you can put some innuendo out there, but not too much, because that can feel like pressure towards sexuality if that desire hasn't risen within her. If you do things in that particular way, then it subverts the dynamic, right? Now, the thing to understand is this. When you are engaging with a woman sexually, it's her responsibility to want to take things further non-sexually. It's your job as a man to make yourself sexually desirable, and it's her job to make herself non-sexually desirable. Understand that. Now, when I say it's her job to make herself non-sexually desirable, if she's making herself non-sexually desirable but it's not according to your program, then it shows that you are a man who doesn't know what he wants, right? You're a man who doesn't know what he wants, and who a woman naturally is something that makes you want to be with her. And that means that she's pre-qualified non-sexually, and she did an exercise of self-control on you. Many men falsely believe that they're in a dominant position with a woman simply because he's putting his penis inside of her. That's not always true. There are going to be some instances where you are taking a dominant stance because you're having sex with a woman without investing in her. But it may simply be that this woman has a surplus of non-sexual validation that she's receiving from men, right? The big three: emotional validation, social validation, and financial investment. And she has a surplus of that energy. And in order to not go through sexual polarity implosion, right? Watch my video on the Mana Principle. She's going to pick a man who she's not non-sexually interested in, so that she can engage and fulfill some of her sexual desires and fantasies without that extending into her desire for a relationship. Now, that's called the no-limit soldier. Now, some women will do that in order to run game. So if you're a guy who then decides you want a relationship, she's going to lose respect for you. And now she feels like she's won. She did the exercise in self-control. You felt triggered or insecure about the fact that she didn't show that she wanted to be with you non-sexually. And because of this, you pretty much lose the game, right? Something to understand, right? That doesn't automatically mean that you're in a dominant position because you're having sex with a woman, unless you're cool with it being only sex. That's the exercise in self-control. And then when it comes to you operating, that's her doing an exercise in self-control out of her own abundance, right? But if this woman wants more, and then you set your standards about what it will take to be more, and you stretch that woman sexually and non-sexually, and she's has the abundance to take that and to mold herself to you and what your standards are and how you want to be treated non-sexually, and you have a program, you have standards that can be met, then that puts you in a scenario where things are going to be a little bit different. So when we understand the exercise and self-control from your side, typically that's going to be because you have an abundance of sex already. I don't think it's smart to be taking an exercise in self-control unless you're in a position where your sexual desire isn't that high. Maybe you've got a little bit older, your libido is lower, your testosterone is a little bit lower, so you're not that focused on sex. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you know you're highly sexually attracted to a woman already, you're highly sexually attracted, and you're operating out of an exercise in self-control and engaging with this woman non-sexually, if the non-sexual interactions cause you desire to sleep with her even more, to the point where now you are starting to chase her for sexual validation, then now you're in a position of weakness. So you have to understand these different things. These are the two different ways of subverting the transactional mindset around sexuality. This is Coach Brody. I'm out.